I was so upset that the very next day I filed the Spending Accountability Act. It said anything that spends taxpayer dollars requires a vote on the record. It was late. Thank you. It was late in the session. I knew it fell on deaf ears. So during the summer, I continued to work on it and try and see how we could strengthen it, try and see how we could make our government better and use this example so that it empowered us going forward. What I realized was it shouldn't just be bills that dealt with spending. It should be everything. If it's important enough to be debated on the floor of the House and Senate, it's important enough for you to know how your legislators voted. Now, the Policy Council did a report that year. The report said of all the bills passed in the House, only 8% of those bills were on the record. Of all the bills passed in the Senate, get ready for it, only 1% was on the record. Right. So my question to you is, if you don't know how your House member voted 92% of the time, if you don't know how your senator voted 99% of the time, how did you know how to vote when you went to the polls? You didn't. You didn't. What you did was you took their word for it, you voted for who you thought was right, but we are now past the days of voting for someone because they look good on a postcard or they hold a baby well. Now we need to be voting for people because they're actually voting the way we want them to and they're representing us properly. That's what votes on the record will do. I want to give you a little history of my career in the State House and let you know how this all falls in line with voting on the record. When I came into the House my first year, I was chairman of the freshman class. When I came in the second year, they named me majority whip. When I came in third year, I was put on an influential Labor, Commerce, and Industry Committee. And when I came in my fourth year, I was subcommittee chair of banking. When I proposed this bill and I said I wanted to see legislative votes on the record, I was told to stand down. I was told we don't need this, we don't want this, and this will hurt us in re-election. Because I chose to fight for you to get your votes on the record, I was stripped of everything. Now, I will tell you what's important. The importance is not the fact that I was stripped of everything. The importance is what we do from here. What was important to me, because I take full responsibility of the fight, I take full responsibility of knowing what the risk was of what I could lose with that fight, because they've made it very clear to me. But what was important to me was if I stood up and I showed other legislators what it meant to go against the grain, to go against the leadership, and to remind them who we work for, because I know who I work for and it's nobody in that State House, then I was hoping that they would get the courage and the strength to realize that's what we all need to do. Now, they were told not to sign on to my bill. They were told that if they did, it would affect their committee assignments. I will always tell you to look at who signed on to that bill early, because those were courageous people and those were strong people, and they took the risk anyway. Nathan Ballantyne coming to mind as being one right off the bat that said, it doesn't matter, I'm going to be there, I'm going to make sure that we get these votes on the record. Once we did that, we continued to have a brutal fight. Governor Sanford came and said, I heard what they did to you, I heard what happened, we need to go out, we need to educate. He was very helpful in terms of making sure that we got the message out. And guess what? All of a sudden, this bill that was never going to see the light of day, this issue that no one wanted to talk about, suddenly we were able to get rules passed in January that now give us an unprecedented number of votes on the record. It passed in both House and in Senate. Now, I will tell you, I didn't make that happen. The people made that happen. They wrote letters to the editor. They contacted their legislators. They said, these votes belong to us, give them back. And so they felt like what they needed to do to get things to go quiet was pass these rules out of the House and Senate. That's not enough. It was a great start. I was thrilled to see it because they said it's going to be too time consuming. It's going to be too costly. It's not going to do any good. And what we found in this first year was it wasn't too time consuming. It wasn't costly. And we got a lot of really healthy debate out of it. And one of the sections of that bill, it says that every bill, uncontested, needs to be on the record. It says every conference committee where House and Senate have to compromise needs to be on the record. It says any amended bill over in the Senate that comes back to the House, if it's changed, it needs to be on the record. But the best part was, it says every section of the budget needs to be on the record. And in a time where the budget is the biggest thing we do every year, that every section matters. Because this year, for the first time, you saw a debate happen on the budget that we've never had before. You saw rank-and-file legislators that don't serve on the high finance committees getting involved in debate and being able to call for those sections on the budget to be on the record, and you saw people opposing our budget. You saw them debating on why it could be more efficient, why it would be more effective if we did it certain ways. It was a very healthy debate. And I actually had rank-and-file members come to me and say, this is good for us. And my intention was never to call out and cause burn to legislators. My intention was, if I could get them to vote on the record, we would, one, have better educated legislators, because they'd have to know what they were doing before they hit the red or green button. And two, we'd have a better educated public, because they could go back and see what that record meant. That was the intention of it. Where it stands now is, I had to request a hearing from the Ways and Means Committee to have the bill heard. When they don't call it on their own, you have to request it. They have to give you that within 30 days. We had a hearing in subcommittee. It passed subcommittee. It was scheduled the very next day for full committee, and that committee was canceled. So we are going into next session needing and having to get that passed out of full committee. We will get it to the House, and I am convinced that when we get it to the floor of the House, we will see what happened like we did with the rules change. When we asked for the rules change, suddenly this bill that no one wanted to talk about, suddenly transparency that was this demon in the corner that all legislators didn't want, passed 115-0. That will happen when we get it to the floor of the House, because they cannot go back to their people and tell them that we don't want votes on the record. So that's where we are with that on-the-record fight. I know that a lot of you care about that. I will not stop. I will not back down. And if the one thing I have said from the beginning is, this goes back to the essence of what government is. And if I can't get you votes on the record, we've got a real problem in Columbia altogether, and we have to address that. Now let me go with some other things. When we talk about spending, there are other accountability issues that we need to talk about. On-the-record voting is just one. Online check registers is another one. And I see Richard Ekstrom in the back of the room, who has been a rock star on that issue. On the local level, school board, county council, and state government needs to be able to show you how your taxpayer dollars are being spent. There's no reason they can't do it. It's important. And once you see how taxpayer dollars are spent, guess what? They're going to behave better with how they spend it. I go back and remind you that this is like a teacher in the classroom. If a teacher's in the classroom, what do the kids do? They behave. If the teacher walks out of the classroom, what do the kids do? They're going to cut up a little bit. Not because they're bad kids, but because they can. Online check registers keep the teacher in the classroom. It reminds them that they're watching, and they will be more responsible with how they spend. The next thing that I want to talk about that is going to be another issue that I know that legislators aren't going to talk about, but it's important to good government. We have a part-time legislature in this state. I get paid $10,000 a year to represent Lexington County. I have to have another job. It is important for you to know what the other job is that your legislators have. We need to have them disclose who's paying them. Once we start having these income disclosures in place, you will start to see why policy moves the way it does. We will start to see legislators start to recuse themselves from votes, and we will start to see a better government when that sunshine comes into play on who it is they work for and what policies may be tied to that. I just think that's good government. Again, that's not causing legislators burn. That's making sure you know who you're electing at the polls. So that's another